Hey everyone, I'm excited to tell you about Comcast Pacific Northwest region. We serve nearly 2.8 million residential and business customers, making Xfinity and Comcast business products and services available to more than 4 million locations in Oregon and Washington. We are also deeply committed to the Pacific Northwest, where our thousands of employees live, work, and support our communities. That is why I'm excited to share that this year we will invest $280 million to expand broadband and video services to many more homes and businesses, offer multi-gigabit internet speeds to over 4 million locations, and supply donations and in-kind services to communities throughout Oregon and Washington. To start, our investment will expand broadband service to approximately 60,000 more homes and businesses in the Pacific Northwest. As part of our investment, we're introducing fiber-rich network improvements that will deliver next-generation broadband with faster speeds, greater reliability, and lower latency. The first phase of network enhancements is happening now, and by year-end, we expect 40% of our network in Oregon and Washington to offer multi-gig internet speeds. Additionally, our investments this year will include cash donations and in-kind services to drive a positive impact in Oregon and Washington. Our work with nonprofit partners will aim to advance digital equity and promote diversity and inclusion. As Oregon and Washington's leading provider of media and technology, we connect people and businesses to resources and moments that matter.
Hello, everyone. My name is Everett Fitzhugh. I'm the radio voice of the Seattle Kraken, and I am happy to be up here to help lead this discussion with JT Brown, Mari Harita, and Digel Cooper. The community is such a huge piece of our organization. It is a foundational pillar of our organization and what we try to do in terms of introducing the great game of hockey to a market that's never had an NHL team before and trying to get sticks and pucks into the hands of everyone in our community, big and small. So before we dive into this, I want to just introduce our panelists and have you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you come from, what arena you're involved in. Mari, I want to start with you, and then we'll go to Digel. We'll start in the middle, and then we'll work our way back around.
No one starts in the middle.
We do things differently, all right? The Seattle Kraken are committed to doing things differently.
I can hang out for a while. We'll do those
Got the power seat right here. So.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Mari Harita. I'm the Senior Vice President of Social Impact and Government Relations for the Seattle Kraken, and I'm also the Executive Director of One Roof Foundation, which is the affiliated 501c3 public charity for both the team and the arena. I am a Seattle native, one of the few. I went to Eckstein Middle School and Roosevelt High School. I went down to Pomona College in Southern Cal. I'm doing this because I'm a local. This is what locals do, if you're wondering why I'm telling them this. But I came back for law school at the University of Washington and practiced law for a while. And through kind of a bunch of twists and turns, I met Todd Lewicki and was going to ask him for money for the nonprofit that I was running at the time. And someone's like, this guy is bringing a hockey team to Seattle. I'm like, what? Like, hockey team to Seattle? And I'm like, whatever, I'll meet with this guy. But there was 3 people in the office, and we had a great chat about community and how much he cares about giving back and all the work he did at the Seahawks and in Minnesota and everywhere else. And I talked about what I was working on, and I thought that was a great conversation. I will never, ever hear from these people again. And he called me back the next week and said, we like what you do and we think there's a place for you here. So that's kind of how it all came to be. I'm sure we'll talk more about exactly what that means.
Absolutely. Digel?
Great. Digel Cooper, and I've been around in the community serving children, youth, and families for 30 plus years. A lot of folks kind of look at me and think, wow, that long, but yes, it has been that long. I started off in my career working with a lot of the primary organizations here in Seattle area. My dad's a military guy, so I've moved around a lot in my life. I came from Oak Harbor, Washington as my last place of living with my parents, and decided to settle here in Seattle. So I've been here for quite a long time. For me, what's real important in my life is that the work that I do has to really align with my own personal values. And I really believe in family. I believe in children. I believe in our community coming together to support our children in this community. And I really, truly do believe that the youth are our future. And it's even more of our responsibility to ensure that they have a clear and accessible pathway to their future. And so I am the CEO at YouthCare, which is a youth serving organization that serves young people ages 12 to 20, or excuse me, 12 to 24 who are experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity. We've been around in this community for 49 years as of this year. And so we're getting ready to celebrate our 50th anniversary next year at our luncheon. Look for YouthCare on the internet for our luncheon. One other thing about this is that I'm new in my CEO role at YouthCare. It's only been 9 months. I feel like it's been 14 years already. They ask, what do you want to accomplish in your first year, in such a position like this? And I said, well, if I could just survive the first year, I'll be good. But in surviving that first year, I really want to begin making this shift in how we show up and do this work. We've been bringing the same plate of food to the table for many, many years. And it's time for this community to really make a change in how we end homelessness for children and families and young adults. So this is what I'm about.
Brownie?
I'm JT Brown. I am the color commentator for the TV side with the Seattle Kraken. I formerly was an NHL player. I played for about 7 years, course of 365 games, Minnesota, Anaheim, and Tampa, and recently retired. So I'm in my second year of doing broadcast. No real experience from that, but I know the game. Hockey's been... It's true.
Way to sell it, Brownie. Way to sell it.
Well, we're talking about hockey is all I've ever really known. I grew up in Minnesota where we just would skate outside. We would skate on the ice as soon as it got minus degrees or minus 30, we'd still be out there. It didn't really matter. So, for me, growing up in a place where hockey is so accessible, it's always been, at the front of what I want to do is try to bring the game, whether I was in Florida and it's another region where hockey's not that accessible, or Anaheim, the same thing, where you want to be able to bring this game that I've played for pretty much my entire life and love to as many people as possible. And, for a place like Seattle where there is hockey, we know about the WHL teams, but continuing to grow the game in a place where, the ice isn't as, it doesn't get to minus 30 here, which I am thankful for, but just the ease of Minnesota and trying to figure out how, I can use, my platform, whether when I was playing or now, working with the Kraken to continue to bring this game that's the best in the world. And fingers crossed, because once playoff hockey comes, that is then the best game in the world.
So the Kraken actually are win and they're in tomorrow. So yeah. Just real quick, JT, 15 seconds, right? Give us a breakdown of this season so far. And obviously year one wasn't where we wanted to be, but now year two, this team is on the cusp of making history once again.
Well, there's been ups, there's been downs, there's been streaks, there's been history good for the Seattle Kraken, personal history for players on the team. It's just been a total team effort from everybody up and down the lineup to get them where they are today. But they don't necessarily have, say, that superstar player, that guy that's got 130 points. But as a team, when they play collectively together, they're incredibly hard to beat.
Well, there it is. So, yeah, absolutely. So JT, him and I hit it off pretty early when he moved here, and he's always been very active in social causes throughout his career, and wanting to advance the game. And I hope he doesn't mind me telling this, but he was actually the first NHL player to raise his fist in protest of the national anthem, 2016, 2017, something like that. So that's absolutely. So I want to ask Mari and JT this question here. When you look at the Seattle Kraken and you're trying to grow the game of hockey, we as an organization are wanting us to be representative of the community that we represent. This is a very diverse city of Seattle, whether it be racially, whether it be gender metrics, whatever. How have you seen the organization of the Seattle Kraken that doesn't look like every other NHL front office, trying to embrace this sport and truly embody the phrase "hockey is for everyone"?
Thanks for that question. And then we're going to go back to you and do your introduction and who you are and all that stuff.
Fits. All you need to know. It's all encompassing.
So JT said something about it's the greatest game in the world. And I do not have a hockey background, as my boss constantly reminds me and everyone who meets me. But what I will say is when I see fans of hockey, it's a different level of fans. And I love sports and my friends love sports, but something about hockey people, it's a different kind of passion. And then I'll also say, because you said about our front office, Todd Lewicki, for those of you who know him, he's an out-of-the-box thinker. And I think that allows him to not be bound by certain constructs that limit all of us. You know, if we're kind of, we're supposed to think this way, whether it's conscious or unconscious biases we have. And he just uses he's all over the place. So what it allows him to do, though, is think, what am I trying to do as an organization and who do I hire? And he goes a lot on gut and heart. And I mean, that's why Everett and me and JT are here, is because of Todd Lewicki's vision of what he wanted to build for a team. And we have, I believe, the most diverse front office in the NHL. I think 30% or so BIPOC, 40% women throughout the organization, different departments, different levels. It's something our bonuses are tied to from a metric standpoint. We talk about it a lot, and it's a priority because it's not necessarily easy to do, but it is definitely doable. And with that comes a different kind of culture. It comes a culture where really everybody feels seen and respected and representative. People aren't as afraid to say what they want to say because they know there are other people who might share their background. And being in that and seeing people who aren't in that shows me how important it is to have people who have your backs, because people aren't always going to agree. And it's not because someone's right or wrong, but if you're in the minority and everyone says, no, I don't agree with that, you're not going to say no, but actually I'm right because of all these things. You're going to okay, fine. When our organization, and one thing I'll say about Todd is, and he just won the Blake Nordstrom Humanitarian Award from the Puget Sound Business Journal. Yeah. So, typical Patty Payne, I get this text at 7:45, I need to talk to you in the next hour. Like, okay, good, I'm here, call me. So she's like, I need to talk to you about Todd. So I was talking about Todd, and I said, look, we don't always agree, but I am totally I tell him everything I think. And I feel safe doing that, which I probably wouldn't feel doing for about, I'm going to say 85% of people in his position. And that to me says a lot, and it cannot be overstated how important that is. And then we'll talk it through. But I just have so much respect for that. And that really permeates through everything we do, through our partnership with YouthCare, through the nonprofit we've started that is really focused on racial equity and bringing people into the game and the sport who historically have been excluded, whether it's because of financial or cultural barriers, whatever that is. We are breaking those down so that everyone is, as JT said, can be a part of this amazing sport. It's good for the sport, it's good for the industry, it's good for our organization, and it's good for our community.
I think about the Kraken, and we talk about the diversity. I mean, I just walking through our offices, and what I see is what I see on a daily basis. And I think that really helps Seattle. In my eyes, I consider them to be a leader in the NHL when it comes to, diversity and inclusion. And the reason they can do that is because they have such a diverse staff when you walk through and you can see everybody. And that's a little bit different, say, for some of the NHL teams. I feel like sometimes in the NHL, maybe they'll follow in a situation where it's only been, into the second year of existence for a team playing wise, and they're already at the top of the NHL when it comes to leading the way in finding opportunities that fit growing the community and growing the game of hockey. So I think there's a lot of you can follow, but I don't think that that's the Seattle Kraken way. I think that everyone that's been brought in, whether, the people up here or everyone back in the offices, we're all looking for new ways and finding new ways to continue to grow, whether it's the sport or just in general, just be more inclusive and how we can do that as an organization. So for me, it's one, just walking through, but also it's the fact that I feel that Seattle, the Kraken, are always looking for that opportunity, whether it's in the community or doing different things like, the Skyway Park or going to the food bank and things of that nature. They don't have to do that, but they're always looking for new ways to continue to keep elevating the community.
You know, it's funny. I say this all the time, and every day I go to work, it still rings true. I've had more black coworkers in a meeting today than I've had black coworkers my entire professional career, period. And that says something about a sport that, and I may get in trouble for saying this, but historically has not been very accepting to the folks sitting up here. If you're not, a white male, historically, it's not been a place for you, and that's changing. And I think Seattle is leading that. And when we talk about growing the game, it starts at the grassroots level. It starts with the kids. You want as many pucks and balls and sticks and skates in the hands of kids as possible. So, DeGale, when you think of this partnership with the Seattle Kraken and growing the game in an area that really hasn't had much of the game, what's it been like from your perspective, working with Seattle, the Kraken, and seeing the community embrace this sport on that grassroots level?
Yeah, for us, we're like I said, we serve young people 12 to 24, and a lot of the young people that we serve have never had normalizing childhood experiences. Most of their life has been about trying to find housing, stable and safe housing. And so, in our partnership with the Kraken, they've been able to provide our young people an opportunity to go out on the ice and put skates on and try to get around that ice without falling and cracking their heads open. There's a liability for our agency, but but at the same right, I know, right? But at the same time, we still have young people that are in our housing programs and our engagement centers that talk about the fact that they ice skated for the very first time. I was asking my staff today for, just kind of a anecdotal story to tell. We serve young people who are also new to this country. They're fleeing war-torn countries and coming here at the border, and they end up in our program, which is our Casa Amigos program. And one thing that a couple of the kids were saying is that they never even owned a pair of skates, let alone a bicycle. And the fact that they were able to come to the Iceplex and skate and meet people and realize just what ice actually looked like in a large expansive area like that was just pretty amazing for many of them. But for me as a leader of of our organization, I think what's most important to me is the Kraken is a social impact partner for us, and for us, social impact is about really focusing on a cause in our community and really trying to do something about it. And what we're trying to do something about is ending youth and young adult homelessness. And so this is the benefit that we get from working with the Kraken, One Roof Foundation, Climate Pledge Arena. We believe at YouthCare that the pathway out of homelessness, out of housing instability, is about economic stability. So you have to give young people a pathway to find economic stability, and that's what the Kraken's helping us to do.
You mentioned the One Roof Foundation, and Mari, as the charitable arm of the Seattle Kraken, working with many different causes around the community, youth care being one of the largest ones. But for you and your daily role, how have you seen these partnerships continuing to grow the access to ICE, and not only just from a sporting perspective, but ending youth homelessness, access to clean water, clean air, things like that are essential not only for sport but just for life?
Thank you. So I mentioned in my earlier intro that part of my role is at the Kraken, and part of it is running this nonprofit that we created in parallel with creating the Kraken. And most sports teams have some kind of a affiliated nonprofit. And so when Todd and I and others sat down early on, we thought, what is it we're trying to do with this, and what do we fundamentally care about? Because when a nonprofit, you need that theory of change. You need to know what those values are that guide you, and it's pretty simple and it's not novel. But we said we kind of care about each other and we care about the planet, meaning that we believe that everybody's life, like every single person in this room's life, is tied to every other person's out there life. And if you're not okay, I'm not okay. And issues like youth homelessness and climate change and inequitable opportunity to hockey or sports or education, they don't impact only certain people, they impact all of us. And we really need to own that and lean into that and figure out collectively how to solve for that. And similarly, our future depends on the future health of the planet. And so we got to figure that out too. And so our foundation then, our nonprofit, works toward those objectives through 3 primary impact pillars, one being working with primarily YouthCare, but other partners in the community to help end youth homelessness, housing insecurity. The second is to increase access to hockey, to sport, and to life opportunities for historically marginalized and minoritized youth and families. And the third is to advance environmental justice, as Fitz just mentioned, meaning that everybody should have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink and clean and safe places to gather and play, but they don't. And the causes and impact of climate change, while global, the causes and impacts are really hyper-local and disproportionately burden low-income communities, immigrant communities, and communities of color. And so we picked that as our third pillar because of the arena's partnership with Amazon and the Climate Pledge. So the environmental justice pillar is really about where sustainability and social justice meet. And so they're all tied in that way, and that we're serving a lot of the same communities. Are just different things, the different things we do. Everett mentioned that you mentioned we were down in Skyway. So our foundation partnered with King County Parks and Recreation to help be part of their Skyway Park renovation, and we built these multi-sport stanchions that have a ball hockey goal, but also a basketball hoop, and you can play futsal. And we hired a local artist to do Kraken branding, sort of in the Skyway style. And then we had this opening, and these guys came out, and Bowie came out, and Jermaine Curse came out, and the community came out, and played hockey on there. And we brought sticks and balls, and we're trying to bring hockey to where it hasn't been, but on the terms of the communities that we're going to. And we really are trying to not be a top-down, like, hey, we have this great idea that you are going to love organization, versus, hey, what are the needs? What can we do? And then figure out, of the things that they want us to do, what can we do? And then that's the approach we're taking, whether it's with YouthCare and youth homelessness, whether it's with access or environmental justice work. And we do a lot of work in the South Park neighborhood, which is a community really suffering from environmental injustice.
You could, go ahead, sorry.
Can I just add too, a lot of folks don't know, but young people of color and LGBTQ plus and gender expansive youth are disproportionately represented in the homelessness system and all systems of care right now. And so when you look at our city, when you look at who's out there, a lot of us look around and we see people that are living in tents on our sidewalks and things. But homelessness for young people looks very different. You don't see really the young people out there, the ages of 12 to 24. So, a lot of times we just don't know who these youth are, but they are disproportionately represented in our homelessness system.
We used to joke in the organization that we were the world's largest startup company. And I think we still have a little bit of that startup culture. And Mari, you just outlined all of the steps that it took to get to this point. And when you're trying to build a nonprofit, and this isn't your normal NHL team charity arm, this is something completely different. What are some of the issues and challenges that you ran into between the public sector, the private sector, trying to establish the relationship with YouthCare? Was it a phone call? How do you know what I mean? Like, how do these things start when you're trying to make foundational, fundamental changes?
Well, the YouthCare partnership preceded DeGale and me. That was a Tim Lewicki, Melinda Giovango conversation where, and you can imagine, so Tim Lewicki, who is our CEO's brother, equally as visionary, equally as out of the box, and Melinda, and they sat down and had like a bunch of ideas, and really that's how it came to be. And that was part of our agreement with the city, is one of the big social impact partners would be YouthCare. So that was there. But when, when we sat down and talked about what we otherwise were going to prioritize, it had to do with the team, the focus on hockey, and then the environmental piece of it. As far as challenge, so we are doing things differently, certainly. But we did talk to all the other teams in town. We talked to a bunch of the other clubs across the country to see what they're doing. One of the benefits of being new is you get to start from a clean slate. You learn we learn from our own mistakes. We hear from others about, oh yeah, we don't want to do this, or oh, this is where the trend is going. We study the scholarship, whether it's in civics or sociology or whatever it is, to say, okay, where is philanthropy going and what needs to change? And so we are able to do that, which is great. I think a challenge is, it's different. And so some people are like, why are you doing that? Like why is a hockey team doing that? And so it's incumbent on us to explain why it's good for the team, It's good for our fans, it's good for our community, and it's good for the sport. And it just takes a little more education, because anytime you make a change, I mean, we were on the call with Rob, and Eric and I were on a call with Dow Constantine the other day saying, we need to talk to people in the county about the flooding in South Park. And he's on the call like, this is an interesting conversation for a hockey team. But, it works. So
JT, you've been around the NHL. You've played overseas. You've obviously were in college and juniors. I can go on and on and on. You, I have to imagine, were one of the very few black faces on your teams growing up as a pro. When you come to Seattle and you are here from day one, you're trying to bring the game that you love. What experiences do you lean on? I know you were very active in Tampa and different charitable events. What do you lean on to try and pull and use your pull, your voice to help grow this game?
Well, I think for me, the number one, I guess I'd say, memory or story that I try to lean on, and it pushes me to continue to keep doing more. Everett, I've told you this one before, but growing up, I usually was the only person of color on my team. Sometimes I was lucky; I had one other one as well that I grew up with. But during a game, I was called the N-word during a game, and obviously I came back to the bench upset. And my coach asks me what's going on. He can tell that something's not right. I try to tell him, I'm okay. It's fine. I think I got to be about 8, 9 in the area. But I tell him what goes on, and he goes to the ref. That player needs to be kicked out of the game. That's unacceptable. Well, the ref said I didn't hear it. And for me, not having any punishment, I was kind of like, what's going on? I'm on the bench. I'm not in a good state. My coach took the team off the ice. We forfeited the game and said, we will not play if that player does not get kicked out. They couldn't kick him out because he didn't hear it. But for me, that showed me that hockey is for everyone, that I belonged in this game, in moments where that had happened before and I'd never said anything. And so you kind of questioned whether or not this was going to be the sport for myself. And you had said, whether you didn't see a lot of faces like myself in the game or on my team in my locker room. So I was the only one dealing with that. But to have my coach, who was a white male, step up in that moment for me was a huge part of why I continued to play hockey, why I want to make the game accessible, because I just think all the time about, a young kid was in my shoes that didn't have that exact same support, that quit the game. I don't want them to quit the game because I got so much out of the game that I love. So for me, that's the biggest thing that I lean on and why I want to continue to grow this game and keep pushing and, to make sure that hockey really is for everyone. And I truly believe that. I think we're, as an NHL, as a sport, as a team, we're making these strides. And I won't say that everything's perfect. We still have a lot of room to grow within the space, especially in the NHL and in hockey. But again, it starts with the kids, and when you can reach the kids, that's how the trickle effect starts. And who knows how long that process will take. But myself, ever since that moment, I think I've been committed to it.
You mentioned hockey is for everyone. That is a big pillar of the NHL, and I think some teams say that because it sounds sexy. It sounds good, right? Hockey is for everyone. We can cross off that box. But for the Seattle Kraken, the different Hive nights, hockey is for everyone. We call them Hive nights, that we have specialty jerseys, community outreach groups, partnering for those games. Mari, how did those come about? And when you're trying to figure out what group, what cause you'd like to support, because ideally we play 41 home games, we'll have 41 different jerseys, 41 different causes. But, for us, each year, and I say each, it's only been 2, but each year we try to bring in 1 or 2 new partners, 1 or 2 new causes to help support and to elevate their voices. So how did a lot of those discussions start for the Hive Nights and this organization believing that hockey is for everyone?
First, I wanted to comment when you said each year, because we got this email saying, so we're on the verge of making the playoff. It's historic for our organization. Yeah. Like, wow, it's year 2. But
I remember back when old Tungsten Arm Jones, way back in the day for the Seattle, I have no idea, but yeah, way long time ago.
So as Everett said, hockey is for everyone is a league initiative that recognizes the need to be more inclusive, provide space to include and represent and uplift other communities. And so they have like a whole series of different nights, some of which fall within the season, some of which don't. So this year we did with Green Night, sort of our own thing, but Pride Night, women's hockey, Black History, Indigenous Peoples, Lunar New Year. I think that's it.
Yes.
And so what we do, but we don't want it to be like a a Hallmark holiday where like, okay, we don't care about this all until this night, and now we really care. So this is this is an opportunity to really highlight it, but we really try to focus on it year round to be authentic. But for example, so like for Lunar New Year was new this year. We didn't do it last year. And I'm Japanese American. I don't celebrate Lunar New Year. And I'm like, hey guys, you know that like not all Asians celebrate Lunar New Year, right? This is not an Asian holiday. I'd be like, yeah, no, we knew that, so we're like, go like, who in our organization can talk about Lunar New Year? So we didn't really have somebody like, yeah, I kind of celebrate it, but I'm adopted. So, so we called Wing Luke Museum and said, hey, can you school us on Lunar New Year so we do this in the right way? And so they got their Lunar New Year experts in a meeting with pretty much every department that we were involved with this game, and we asked all these questions and what is authentic, what is inauthentic, what do you recommend, what should we avoid, things like that. And I have to say I was pleased at how many people showed up and like people were really listening, because this team is trying to do things in a good way. We don't always get it right, but we are trying to do it and open to learning. And so they were, the wing was great. They helped us out. And so that is how we like to design our program. And we rely on experts. Same with Indigenous Peoples Night. We had the second night, but we started a relationship with the Indigenous community in 2019. One of my first jobs getting here is, I said to Todd, well, okay, if we really want to build relationships with the community, we have to reach out to the community. And so I sat down with 3 of my very close Indigenous girlfriends. I'm like, how do we do this? And they're like, invite people to a lunch. I'm like, okay, who do we invite? They're like, here's a list. And there's who you order from. I'm like, okay. So we did. And we had like 35 tribal leaders, nonprofit leaders come in. And we kind of sat back and said, we don't really know what we're doing, but we are new. We're coming in as a hockey team. We don't have a name. We don't have an arena, but we know, seriously, we are an actual viable sports team, and I'm like, really? And I said, and we want to be good community partners. So thank you for coming. And we just want to hear from you what that looks like. And we don't know what we're able to do yet, because we have 30 people working here, but we want to hear from you what your priorities are, what you need, and what you think this might look like. And it was a sort of beautiful conversation. And what really rose to the top of that was focus on our youth, help our youth, and make sure we're also visible. And from that, I spent 8 months working on our land and people's acknowledgement statement with the local tribes. We've done a lot of youth programming. We've done a bunch of different things. And then most recently, it kind of culminated in this historic Jersey Patch partnership with the Muckleshoot tribe. Not the casino, but the tribe, where we have a partnership where next year, our team will have the Muckleshoot logo on our jerseys, which is we were so honored that they would trust us with that. And they're really honored as well. So it's kind of this awesome thing.
A couple more questions for you guys. I know we have some audience questions as well. DeGale, I'll start with you, and then I'll have one for each of you after. Where do you see this partnership going? This was obviously the first step. We're in year 2 of hopefully forever with the Kraken in Seattle. Where do you see this partnership with the Kraken going, and where would you like to see it go?
Well, I would like to see every young person that we work with have a job with the Kraken or Climate Pledge Arena, right? I mean, that, right?
There it is. That's my fault. I set it up. All right. Last time he moderates.
Right. What's really interesting about that is that, I mean, that's what our partnership is about. And they do a really good job of providing internships and actual employment and job support for the young people that we serve. Our partnership is about building this, organization, this business and nonprofit partnership where we provide a safety net for young people. The youth that we work with are, they've got a lot of things going on in their life, and they step into these traditional jobs, and the employer is not as patient, not as understanding, doesn't have the skills that they need to be an inclusive workplace to make sure that they reduce barriers in the workplace for young people like the young people that we serve. And I just want to remind everyone that even though we're serving young people who are experiencing housing insecurity, that's just one of the many issues that young people face nowadays. I've got a 25-year-old and a 35-year-old, and I can tell them that even with a very, intact home, they still have challenges, and it's expensive to live in this city. And the jobs that most young people get are entry level, and so they're not making more than $25 an hour for the most of them. So it's just real important that this kind of partnership leads to sustainable employment for young people. We found out that even though our youth wanted jobs, they were just not exactly ready for those jobs, and we had more work to do. So that was a revelation for us. Like, okay, yeah, let's just give them a little support and put them in a job. But no, it's not like that. So we work with Kraken and Climate Pledge Arena staff to ensure that they understand how to work with the young people that we serve. So we need more jobs. We need every single one of them employed, and they need to be making $30 an hour plus so that they can live in this city.
I'm really in trouble now. JT, last one from me for you. Where is the game of hockey going with respects to more Black kids, more women, more historically underrepresented communities becoming involved with the game? We just had our first Black NHL GM and Mike Greer with the San Jose Sharks this past summer. Obviously, myself and JT, the first full-time Black team broadcasters. A lot of firsts still to be made. But where is our game, our league going with that respect, and where do you want to see it go?
Well, I think it's trending the right way. I think when you look around, whether it's, at KCI and the rinks are completely filled with people on the weekend, it's impossible to get Starbucks while we're getting ready for practice. There's so much going on, and you can see the different groups of people at the rink. So, I mean, from a start, when you look at the youth, that's where the game's going, is who's playing the game, the 8, 9, 10, even younger than that. That's what's going to be the future of the NHL. So, obviously, yeah, you can look at, Quentin Byfield when he was drafted, to be able to be drafted the highest position or highest drafted as a Black person in the NHL, like, that's great. But then I'm looking at for the future. When we look at the future, it's who's playing in those rinks right now. Who's at KCI doing learn to skate? Who's, the weekend tournaments? And I see that there's more and more, especially coming from where when I was playing, I might have been the only one in the 5 cities around us that we were playing. So to be able to see the growth and to be able to see that, I think it's trending the right direction. Obviously, having the Hockey is for Everyone nights, across the league, and having teams have different programs set up, whether it's learn to skate or things of that nature. I think it's processing, and we're moving towards the right direction. What I'd like to see is that all the firsts are done. We don't have to have the first number one overall. We don't have to have the first this, that, and the other. It just becomes a normal thing. Obviously it's great. Me and you were a part of a historic night as well, to be the first all Black commentary team for the NHL. And it's great, but now hopefully it happens again. Hopefully there's more, and continuing to show, different underrepresented communities that they're welcome in this game. So for me, we're trending the right way. And obviously the goal would be that the firsts are all done and we can just continue to play.
Mari, last one from me for you. This is your elevator pitch. In the community, I want to get involved. I want to get involved in bringing hockey, in growing the One Roof Foundation, our pillars. What are some ways that I can do that?
For growing the game of hockey, I think, what JT said, I think is really important, to just help create opportunities for youth across the region from different backgrounds, from different life circumstances, to have access to the game. I'm not asking for money. If you're giving me that opportunity, this is not, but thank you. So yeah, part of the money that we raise supports our financial assistance program at KCI, and we support, I think, about 400 kids this year. 85% are kids of color, 52% are girls. We've translated our materials into 5 languages to further reduce barriers. So that is one where we're doing it. We always love support, but I think there's a lot of ways to just in your own backyards, see who's playing, who's not, and whether it's at schools or other places, and create spaces and support for kids who want to get involved. But before we get to Gail's last question, are you saying anything about who you are and like your whole thing?
I mean, well, I try to be modest. All right. So my name is Everett Fitzhugh. My name is Everett Fitzhugh. I am the radio play-by-play announcer for the Seattle Kraken. I've been with the organization for 3 years. First year before we broadcasted games, and then now our second season. I've taken the route that is commonly traveled by a lot of players. I got my start in broadcasting in college. I went to junior hockey from there, worked a year and a half in the USHL league office. I then went to Youngstown, Ohio for a year. I spent 5 years in Cincinnati in the ECHL, so that's the AA hockey there. And, I tell this story all the time about how I got my job here in Seattle, because one of our owners is Jerry Bruckheimer, and I got to meet him for the first time. And I said, Jerry, even you couldn't have written a script as good as how I got my first job here. My job here, it was in the middle of a pandemic. Todd Lewicki, our CEO, read an article about me, and he sent me an email. And in my line of work as a broadcaster, as a front office person, the CEO of a team does not email you personally. So first red flag right there. Then you get to meet Todd, and then you're like, oh, he is that person. He is such an amazing guy. He knows what and who he wants, and he goes to get it. I didn't know that at the time. So I didn't reply to it. I kind of left it on red. And then, because Todd just won't take no for an answer, he followed up. And so I counseled my girlfriend, now my wife, my girlfriend at the time, my mom, a couple of my close friends. I'm like, hey, is this real? Like, what should I reply to this? And it was like, you know what's the worst that can happen? So I'm like, all right, fine. I replied to the email. Turns out it was Todd, but I replied from my work email. So then he says, hey, can you send me a message from your personal email account? I'm like, all right, what kind of Nigerian prince scam is this? Like, how much money am I about to be out right now? But again, it was real. So I emailed him. We had a great first conversation. Then COVID hit. The whole world went upside down, and I was furloughed for my job in Cincinnati. My wife actually had an opportunity in Boston, so I was going to leave broadcasting, and we were going to follow her to Boston. But through the pandemic, that fell through as well. And we were sitting around one day, and my wife said, you ever hear back from that Seattle guy? And I said, oh, they're not trying to hire a broadcaster now. And I kid you not, 2 hours after that conversation, I get an email, and I said, so it's the Seattle guy. So we said, I know the whole world's been turned upside down right now, but we're still building for the future. And, I picked my jaw up off the floor when he said we're still interested. So I was like, yeah, I'd love to work. And interview process was great. And then July 14th of 2020, I get the phone call that the job that I'd been dreaming of since I was 17 years old was finally coming true. So that's a little brief story of how I got to Seattle.
We gotta stop you from saying 3 years though, because your number one does not count. You just sightseeing with Fitz, just taking trips to Alaska.
Oh yeah. Hell yeah, we went to Spokane, went to Eastern Washington. I still lived here. I was on payroll,
That was not work. Let me just put that.
That was fun. So I will say this. I tell folks all the time, I have never worked a day in my life. I genuinely enjoy what I do. So you were right. That was not work. This is not work. Tomorrow's not work. I genuinely enjoy what I do. So I hope, thank you. I hope everyone can find that type of passion and that love for what they do. I know we've got some time left, a little bit of time. Do we have any questions in the audience from folks? We got a couple in the back. Can I get like 3 questions in? All right, we can do 3 questions. All right.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Sposato. I'm the chairman of GeekWire and the owner and publisher of Seattle Magazine and Seattle Business Magazine. But the job that I really want is to be president of the Alicia Crank fan club.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Alicia.
Hey, get in line. That's a long line for that one.
Yep. Right. That is a long line. So thank you, Alicia, for convening this very, very inspiring panel. You guys are doing a great job. So the question that I have, I'm actually kind of triggered is not the right word. It's more that I'm inspired by the phrase that the Kraken is it's basically a startup. And so if that's a startup, and that stuff, startup ecosystem is pretty much my wheelhouse. What would you say are kind of the top 2 or 3 critical success factors that has led to your very, very rapid success? You referenced some culture things or the expansive thinking of the CEO, but what else might have contributed to your fast success?
I will take that one. I think for me, having worked in sports for a very long time, you're only as good as your people. And Todd told me very, very early, I don't want to hire the best community people. I don't want to hire the best finance people. I want to hire the best people. And I think that there's something to be said there, because the culture that we have in our organization is one of vibrance, it's one of youth, it's one of inclusion, it's one that you don't see a lot of. I've shadowed a lot of folks, I've been to a lot of front offices, and you don't see it. There's a very, we have a young staff. Sometimes I'm the oldest person in the room by like 5, 6, 7 years, and that's okay, because it's a new generation. We want this game to get younger and get more fresh. So I think for me, it's the people that make up our organization that I feel has led to our biggest success, not only on the ice, but off the ice as well.
Well said, Everett.
Thank you.
When the kids get out of school, what activities do you have for them so that they don't get bored, so they don't go back to, that life?
Right. I mean, when I hear you say kids, I'm thinking about our young people that are in our shelter or housing programs for minors, so under 18, 12 to 18 years old. And, we try to do normalizing, types of activities with them. They go on field trips, they go to, the aquarium, and they go hopefully to the Iceplex Center up there at Northgate. But really, what we're trying to do is, because there are so many challenges that those young people have, is work on homework, make sure that they're doing homework, that they're establishing good, healthy habits so that they can take with them whatever that next step is for them. So our staff work diligently 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year, working with the young people that are in our programs, trying to reconnect them back to their families in most cases, because ideally that's where a young person goes, is back to their family, and you provide that family with some support so that they can have your kids back home. And others, they end up maybe with a new family somewhere else. And unfortunately, there are young people who end up moving from age 18 into our young adult program, but they're still housed with YouthCare. And so, like I said, for some that trajectory is long, but for most it's short.
One more. All right.
Let me preface this by saying I've been a hockey fan for 40 years, but I am first and foremost a Penguins fan. In fact,
And that's all the time that we have. Thank you, everyone. No.
and you're no Mike Lang.
Yes, let's go. That's true. That's very true.
In games against the Pens, I wear a 10 Ron Francis jersey. So I'm wondering, how has Ron been as part of this effect? I mean, in Carolina, he probably didn't have a particularly diverse front office. When he played, the league was all white. He's a kid from the Sioux. Just how is it that Ron Francis is doing all this?
From the few stories that I've heard, so if you don't know Ron Francis, he's a brilliant hockey mind. He knows his stuff. He plays things very close to the vest, and we joke often that only Ron Francis knows what Ron Francis is going to do when Ron Francis does it. But I can tell you from personal experience and from what I've heard from Ron is that he's fully embraced what the Seattle Kraken are trying to do. And I'll give you a story. The last few months in the NHL, there's been a number of players choosing not to wear pride jerseys for whatever reason that they want to come up with. And Ron Francis had a meeting with the players, and he said, under no circumstances will that happen here. We represent, yes. We are representative of our community. We want to be leaders in our community. There have been a number of players who have had issues in the past, and I've heard that he doesn't talk to them because he wants people who are going to represent this organization and this community the right way. So Ron is been at the forefront from a hockey ops perspective of trying to lead our mission in the locker room with respect to racial diversity, with respect to gender diversity. We have a number of female employees who are regularly in the locker room every single day. And he, you will treat them with respect. You will not make comments. So that is something that he himself has taken upon to drive home within that locker room. All right, so that is all for portion one. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, JT. Thank you, Mari. Thank you, DeGale. We'll all be around for another 10, 15 minutes. If you want to pull our ears a little bit more, we'd be more than happy to talk to you guys. So thank you guys very much.
Hi, y'all. Yes, thank you for that. So I'm Jaquanda Nelson, she, her pronouns. And in my full-time role, I'm CEO of Diversity Window. We help organizations with their diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts. And so I was very excited to hear all the work that Kraken is doing in that space, like genuinely doing the work and not just talking about it. And I'm also co-ambassador for Black Girls Run Seattle Tacoma. We actually just celebrated 10 years in March, yes, of running in Pacific Northwest. And we're having our 10-year anniversary retreat this weekend. So this conversation I am like bubbling. And these two leaders here, I can't believe I get to be on the stage with them. So before we get into it, I'm going to have them introduce themselves. But many people say, I'm not a runner, I'm not in the space, but each of you have an impact in the space. And I hope you listen for that as we have this conversation to think about how we can bring equity, inclusion, and racial equity to the space. So I am going to introduce, I won't introduce them, actually let them introduce themselves before we jump into the discussion. So Alison, you want to start?
Sure. My name is Alison Mariella Desir, she, her pronouns. I'm from New York, but I moved to Seattle 2 years ago. And if you told me 10 years ago I would move to the West Coast, I would never have believed you. I would have said you can't pay me enough money to leave New York. But everything changed during the pandemic. I have a son who's 3 years old, and just not being able to leave your 700 square foot apartment let me know that I wanted a different kind of life. I am the author of a book called Running While Black that talks about my story, and also talks about the way that freedom of movement has never really been something Black people could enjoy in this country. And I do a lot of running and outdoor things. I also have a PBS show called Out and Back, where I get to tell the stories of incredible Black, Indigenous, and other people of color who are reclaiming space in the outdoors. So I'm always busy doing something.
Megan, do you want to go?
Yeah, you also founder of Harlem Run.
Yeah.
So many things. I'm very humbled to be on the stage with Alison and Jaquanda. I'm Megan Wolfe. I'm the executive director at Girls on the Run of Snohomish County. And Girls on the Run is a national organization, but each chapter is an independent nonprofit. So I am in the Seattle area. I went to school at UW, both undergrad and grad school, and now live in Edmonds with my family. And 8 years ago, got the opportunity to start Girls on the Run of Snohomish County after being a volunteer in King County for a few years and just falling in love with the program, what it gives kids, the life skills that we teach are about healthy friendship and communicating your emotions and how to be your best self in a really authentic way. So our program teaches kids to make those choices for themselves. And I love that. And I think 8 years in, I still learn from the program. And so, yeah, that's who I am.
Thank you. Thank you. So we are going to talk about what running looks like and being outdoors for youth, and specifically BIPOC youth, can look like. But I think it's important to start with the barriers. So Alison, you wrote a book, Running While Black. I read that book the fastest I've ever read a book. I cannot put it down. As a runner, being a Black woman in this space, can you share just some surprising takeaways and insights that you had, and touch on racism and running along the way?
Yeah, I wish I could say that there were surprising insights. I think that for some people, when they read the book, they find it surprising. For me, I found it validating and affirming of my lived experience and what I've witnessed within the space. There's one chapter in particular that I talk about that's called Everything is Connected that I'll talk about here. And my journey with running, I started running now 11 years ago when I was very depressed. I was always, I was on my couch in my bed scrolling through social media, looking at people live their best lives because that's what people show on social media. But thankfully, one of the people who I saw on social media was a Black man training for a marathon, and he looked not too different from, what was the gentleman's name who was sitting here? The Everett. Okay, so had Everett's build. When you look at Everett, not to put him on the spot, I don't think you immediately think long distance runner, right? So I was looking at this guy training for a marathon, and I was like, come on now. First of all, Black people don't run marathons. Second of all, if we do, we don't look like that, right? We're East African, we're thin, we're, long legs. So I had all these preconceived notions about what a long distance runner was, but I found it fascinating that he was running and he was sharing how it was changing his life. And any person who's ever run before knows that it's not really a run unless you share it on social media. So he was evangelizing as we do. And I was really intrigued by that. And I thought to myself, well, nothing in my life is going according to plan. What if I try running a marathon? Maybe I'll experience what he did. And sure enough, I signed up for a marathon and completed the marathon, raised over $5,000 for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And it truly saved my life. But as I was showing up in these spaces, I kept asking myself, where are all the Black people? Right? Like if running is for everyone and you can just show up, all you need are running shoes, then why aren't there a lot of Black people in long distance running? So I started to get curious about these questions. And in the chapter, Everything is Connected, it's my favorite chapter, I begin to tackle some of these issues. And I did that in one particular way, looking at environmental justice. Does anybody know the app Strava? Okay, so Strava is an app that allows you to track your data, so your movement data. So if you run, walk, hike, a million different activities, you can track it. And all of that activity is accumulated on what's called heat maps. So essentially, you can go to Strava and you can look at places where there's a lot of heat. It's because a lot of people are moving. So I got curious. I wondered, what if I compared these Strava heat map data to redlining data? Does anybody know what redlining was? Okay, redlining was a practice by the United States government, essentially a strategy of white supremacy to limit Black people from getting access to mortgages, which then contributed to the wealth gap and lots of other problems. So I started to wonder, is there a correlation between areas that were once redlined and areas of movement? And what I found is that areas that were redlined continue to this day to be areas that have very little movement, right? So people are not running, walking, hiking in these areas. These are also areas with with poor air quality, with poor sidewalks, with food deserts, right? So I started to recognize that who is a runner, who sees themselves in these spaces, very much is tied to factors beyond our control, right? So it's not about just going out for a run. It's not about just getting a pair of shoes necessarily. There are these other environmental factors. There's the question of physical safety, psychological safety. And so that's a lot of what I uncover in my book. For many people, this does come as a surprise, for many white folks in particular, to recognize that when we go for a run, many of us run through a whole checklist of things, right? Like, am I wearing bright clothing? Did I tell somebody where I'm going? Am I running in a neighborhood where they won't think that something criminal is happening because I'm moving through space? And I think that this book is really powerful because it allows another perspective on this sport that I love, that has saved my life, but that certainly is not equitable.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that was very insightful how you connected it, because you do hear that often. Oh, running's for everyone. It's available to everyone. It's outside. Just do it. And there's so many barriers. And so, Megan, I really appreciate our conversation. I also should say I served on the Girls on the Run board West Sound because of Megan, because we got a connection through Alicia. So this whole thing is full circle. I met her for the first time today because it was a 2020 conversation. And so I know the work that Girls on the Run is doing. Can you share not only the work that you're doing to empower girls, help support girls, and get them not only to running, but other components of the program? And how are you breaking down some of those barriers that your girls of color are more likely to face?
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, Girls on the Run is a program where for girls and gender expansive youth in grades 3 through 8, we have a curriculum where it's about running, but it's not about running. So we are a non-competitive running event. At the end is a 5K. And so our kids are training for that, but it's totally non-competitive. And we want the kids to understand that, showing up and wanting to run really hard one day is a great choice. And the next day, your friend had a tough day, and walking laps with your friend and talking it out, that's also a healthy choice. And it's going to change day to day. And Allison's happy pace is different than my happy pace. And my happy pace is different on every day. And all of those are healthy choices. And so we do attract naturally kids that aren't joining the cross country team. They don't want to race in anything, but they do want that movement, or their parents want that movement for them. So that's one component. And then the other parts of our program, the actual curriculum, are teaching those life skills so that kids have the tools to make those healthy choices for themselves. Say a friend is doing something they're not comfortable with. We want those kids to feel comfortable saying, not comfortable with this, I'm out, I'll see you tomorrow, and just have the confidence to do that. When I started this, I really very naively, I am a white woman running a nonprofit trying to serve a diverse group of kids. And I very naively thought, oh man, if we go out and empower these kids, we're going to change the world. And over the last 8 years, obviously a lot has happened in the world. And, we really, from the start, built in diversity goals, but we didn't necessarily really understood all the aspects of that. And so over time, we've really evolved in our thinking in that and our understanding in that. And for us, it's really multi-pronged approach to this work. So we are a white staff across the board. And so a big piece of it is doing the personal work. We each have to be understanding how our whiteness, and specifically being led by white women who have this niceness that can get in the way of doing the real work. We have to understand where that comes from each of us to be able to do any of the actual transformational work that needs to happen. So we've been spending years showing up at classes, doing the work, having discussions on our staff of saying, where are we causing harm? Where are we perpetuating the systems that are at play here? The next piece is figuring out where we can start doing some of those transactional pieces. How do we break down access? Well, we provide financial assistance. We provide running shoes. We go into the Title I schools that are more BIPOC kids because of redlining, because of these systems at play, and how do we make sure we're serving those kids? And when we're showing up in those communities, it's not me going in and saying, hey, I know what's best for you. It's finding people in those communities that work with those kids, that know those families. A great example is up on the Tulalip tribe. We have a really strong program at Quilceda Tulalip Elementary, and we serve a very large proportion of Tulalip kiddos. Well, I'm not Tulalip, I'm not Indigenous, so it's working with that community to figure out how to best serve those kids. And I think a big piece of the work we need to do is we need to check our pride at the door so that we can actually be open to the ideas that we need to take in and implement to serve these kids. So we look at it in a inclusion piece. We want every kid that shows up at our practices to feel that they can be their authentic self. Whether their coaches look like them or not, we want those coaches to be aware of that also. And so we do have an opportunity to bring a lot of well-meaning white women into this work, which is not always easy. We all have our inner Karens, right? And we need to check that. And
I'm glad you said it.
And so at our coach training, we talk very openly about this and understanding the harm that when you're having this program happen at a school right after a school day happens, every kiddo that shows up has not had the same day at school. That school environment is much more traumatic to those girls of color on your team, and you need to understand that. And how you react when a kid is misbehaving on your team, you need to figure out how you're reacting in that situation and if your bias is showing up. And so we really want our coaches to come along with that. So a few years ago, we got a lot more outspoken about the work we were doing. And, around the board, it was very much like, well, are we going to lose volunteers? Are we going to not have kids sign up for the program? And our feeling was, ooh, if we're getting strong in this and volunteers are out the door, we don't want those volunteers. They're not who should be leading this program. And so we need to be really comfortable in that. We do serve a really diverse group of kids. This year, 44% of our kids are white. And if you know Snohomish County, that's not what the county looks like. So that piece we're doing a pretty good job at least bringing them in the door. And so now it's making sure that once they're there, they're having that complete experience. So we're breaking down some of those barriers. And a big piece is also understanding the systems at play. So a large proportion of our coaches are white women because they're teachers. that system is bigger than our tiny little nonprofit trying to do this work. But we've made progress. And how do we continue making progress to make sure our kids have leaders at these teams that look like them, that represent them, and for our white kids, that leaders that don't look like them, coaches that are not white. That's really important too, to break down some of this. So that's some of what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Allison, Megan just shared clear ways that, thinking about those barriers and breaking those barriers down are really important. And society changes, right? So you think you solved it in one area and then something happens in the world and now you have to focus on that. Can you speak to how the Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of George Floyd has really impacted the running community and from what you've seen?
Yeah, I think, well, what I've experienced over the past few years is, what I want to say is like waves of shock from white people about things that are just our ordinary lived experience as Black folks. And there was a key inflection point after the murder of George Floyd, but also the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. And what I heard from a lot of folks within the industry, the running industry remains, the power remains almost exclusively in the hands of white men, but that they had never considered the lived experience of somebody else, right? And that to me is wild to think about, that there are many folks who move through life never actually considering the experience of other people. But that's essentially what folks in the industry were saying. We never thought that one's race could have an impact on how they saw the sport of running. So, following these murders, a group of people came together to form what's called the Running Industry Diversity Coalition. And I was I was in those conversations from the very beginning. And I remember feeling very resentful and thinking, I've known my entire life what it means to be Black in this country. And you suddenly discover that this experience exists, and now it's my role to help you fix it. Thankfully, I came along, and now this coalition is now 2 years old. But what I've seen is that mostly the industry, when things are convenient, they meet their commitments, right? So many brands, organizations have made commitments around racial equity. And when budgets are good and when there's the time and flexibility, then they make good on their commitments. But when other priorities come into play, for example, this year, a lot of budgets are being cut because of the financial situation, you see just how committed they really are, right? So I find myself frustrated at the running industry because a lot of the changes that are being made are simply on the representation side, which representation, of course, matters. If I had not seen a Black man running a marathon, I would not be where I am today. But representation is also the low-hanging fruit, right? It is the easiest thing to put Black models on social media, to feature imagery of folks. But when you're talking about the actual who's making the decisions within the companies, right? All of these companies still remain, the C-suites remain almost exclusively white. So I find myself frustrated at the lack of progress when it comes to actual transformational change. I think running media continues to perpetuate the idea of a thin, cis, hetero, white, male or female being the ideal in running. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I do it because, like I said, running saved my life. It gave me my husband. My son's name is actually Kouri, which means to run in Haitian Creole, right? Like running is everything to me because of both the physical and mental transformation. And I believe that the industry, this multi-billion-dollar industry, really ought to do more to make it more accessible.
Thank you for that. And so I would love to hear from both of you on this. What can people do? And that's why I wanted to call out, like, not everybody may be in the sports or running space. What can people do to help empower BIPOC youth to get into running and fitness and sports? So I'll start with you, Megan.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a white person, I would say if you are white, you need to do the personal work before you jump into any of this, because then you will catch yourself before a lot of the harm is caused, because we will cause harm. We just will. And so understanding that. I think that getting involved with organizations that are already doing the work is one of the best ways. We don't have to recreate anything. There are people like Allison, like Jaquanda, like Black Girls Run that are doing the work, and supporting those organizations is one of the best things we can do. And so, hopefully we as an organization our board is very diverse because we know that it's important to have that those diverse perspectives creating the plan for the next few years and driving what we do. So I think being able to put money and time into the organizations who are already understanding these issues is a really good place to start.
Thank you. What about you, Allison?
Yeah, no, I mean, you covered it. I think in particular, there are a few programs that bring me, that make me hopeful about the state of the running industry. So a particular segment of the running industry is the retail industry, right? Like all of the running stores. And you may or may not be surprised that less than 10 running retailers in the country are owned by Black, Indigenous, people of color. If you think about what are the cumulative reasons for that, right? In order to open any kind of store, you need access to wealth, right? And if you can't get a bank loan, if you don't have a mortgage, right? All of these barriers sort of add up. But I have seen people within the industry creating mentorship programs that essentially, one, introduce, and I know you're talking about youth, but introduce younger people into the concept of ownership, help them with bank loans, literally going into the bank and being a white face when it comes time to get the loan, and walking them through that process of entrepreneurship, and helping when, all the difficulties that come around. And I think that those are very real and tangible resources, right? It's not sort of pie in the sky, I want to be helpful. When people think about, well, what are my particular set of skills? Like what do I know and have access to that can make a deep impact? That's when there's powerful change.
Can I add?
Yeah.
Also read Allison's book. It is so good. It is just
Everyone start there.
really great.
Books with you, by the way.
I don't.
You can order it.
And if you do the audiobook, it's her voice. So
And it's
you feel
amazing.
like you have a friend on your walk. It's fantastic. I was just gonna add, oh my gosh, now I lost it because I was talking about your book.
Something else.
Retail, mentorship.
Loans.
I had a good thought.
Okay.
It's going to come back to me.
We'll come back. Yeah, we have a few minutes. Okay. Yes, read the book. I did both. I listened and I would run and listen, and then I would read when I could sit still. So we cannot leave. Well, you kind of shared how you got into running, but I think it would be really neat to hear, how did you get into running? And what do you love, hate about it? Because that's usually what happens if we're being honest. So I'll start with you, Megan.
Awesome. I will say that. But what I was going to say is, I spent a lot of time in this feeling of hopelessness where I didn't know what to do. I felt like I didn't have a place in this work because as a white person, I felt like it was not my place. I was unsure. And my advice, if you feel like that, is just start somewhere. Pick up a book, listen to some podcasts, dive into the work, show up at a run that is not one of the big marathons. Like, go to those neighborhood runs, support those things, but start somewhere. So
Can I, before you tell your story, I also want to say part of my book and at heart, I'm like a huge nerd. I don't know if you can tell, but I love history. And what I found in terms of in being an ally, really the most important step is that you know people's stories and people's histories, right? And oftentimes the most frustrating for anybody is when somebody comes and says, I want to help, like, tell me everything and where to start, right? And it's like, take responsibility for accessing the World Wide Web and all the incredible resources that are out there. But also, I think it's important to note that particularly in this moment, think about how much effort and resources are going into us not knowing the truth, right? Whether it's books being banned, whether it's curriculums being changed, whether it's words being excluded from classrooms. And that should tell you that the most powerful thing there is history and the knowledge of what has happened so that we don't repeat those steps, right? So I think if ever you're curious about where to start, it's in books, it's in other people's stories, it's in having empathy and understanding that people walk around in this world living a completely different existence, and they also matter, right? Like, you may not always understand it. Thank you. Yeah, I know, I'm getting hype, right? But we may not always always understand it, but to acknowledge it and grapple with it is critical. So yes, read my book, but read all of the books. There's a wealth of information, and then use that in building community, right? Like that's how you connect with somebody, when you can understand their lived experience and where they came from. When I learned that you're from Idaho, right? Like it totally changed. I'm sorry. But no, it's like you gain a new level of respect and interest and excitement. So that's my pitch. But tell us your story.
Yeah, you did. No, this was
I love
great.
this story.
Yeah.
This conversation. So I actually don't love running like these two do. I grew up as a competitive swimmer, and when I was very young, I loved running 5Ks with my mom. And it was really fun. And then I got really into swimming and swam through college for the University of Washington back when they had a swim team. It was great. And then, as swimmers do, I transitioned to doing triathlons, but running hurt a lot. It hurt my knees, it hurt everything. So I actually like learned to rollerblade, and I trained that, and then I'd show up and do triathlons and try to make it through the running. I had a lot of people pass me on the run, and I'd just cheer them on. But after I had my first kiddo, I just wanted to get out and do stuff for me. And so I pop him in the stroller and I started walking, and then I started running. And for about 5 or 6 years, I had a really good relationship with running, and it was awesome. And that's when I founded Girls on the Run, and I was like, this is amazing. And lately, my relationship with running is very much more on the frustrating side, because I keep getting injured, and I think I might be in a long breakup with running. So I'm really leaning on the lessons we teach the kids in our program, which is walking is a really healthy choice. You have to listen to your body. You know what you need. And so as I dream of being able to run again, I'm not sure if I will. So we'll see.
Great. Thank you. What do you love? You already shared that's how you started, right?
Yeah.
Through the, yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you love, hate about it?
Yeah, I mean, I hate so much about it. But what I love is that, particularly now, I have a son who's 3.5 years old, and running allows me an opportunity to process information. I'm not a scientist, but I know that research has been done that movement really does help you process big emotions, big feelings. Oftentimes, I have like my greatest ideas when I'm running, and then I have to like speak into my phone like a weirdo, recording my thoughts. It's also been such a wonderful vehicle for me to connect with other people. We have some of our most vulnerable conversations while we're running. Like, you leave a run and people told you about the divorce, their poop problems, like all kinds of things. And again, it's because of that ease that comes. And then, but it's terrible when you're out of shape and getting back into shape. So anytime I'm in shape, I tell myself, please don't ever get out of shape again. So you have to go through this. But if running weren't teaching me something about myself, I wouldn't do it, right? It's the running teaches me that I can do more than I thought, that I am gritty, that I can do what I say I'm gonna do. And that's what's been so powerful about it.
And I'll just quickly share before Alicia comes and wrap us. So I started running. I'm from Illinois, Chicagoland area. I moved here in 2018 with my little family. Alicia was the first one into Washington to meet my family. I have to tell the story. We showed up at the YWCA office. I had a meeting. I'm in this new role, had my suit on. Our flight got in at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So my family was bringing me there. They have no idea what's happening. My kids had to use the restroom. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm at this work meeting. And we're like, can my kids use the bathroom? So they came to use the bathroom, and we've been connected ever since. So she holds a special place in my heart. But I start running here, which is really wild that and my heart Ryan said this, like, you started running in the wettest part of the country, because everything was fine, because literally my running started June 1st, but I was training for my first half, which was in October. So it started raining, and then I just had gotten my hair done. And so I'm asking the group, which was predominantly white women, like, what do y'all do with your hair? They're like, oh, we just put a hood on. I'm like, I just put $350 worth of hair in my hair. I'm not risking it all for a hood. So I didn't show up to the group run, and I felt a little judged. But I literally Googled Black women run in Seattle, and that's how I found out that there was a Black Girls Run organization, that they had a local chapter, and then I started running. So I've run with both groups, but just the importance of like being in a space with people who understand something as simple as like, don't judge me because I don't want to come to a group run. And I almost didn't run the half marathon because I was like, I can't run in the rain, but I found a hairbrella, so that solved that problem. It's super great if anyone else cares about their hair. It's satin lined, and it's waterproof, so that helped me. But again, just to speak to the importance of being able to have community where you are reflected, people do understand your experiences. And like, I don't love running, but I do love the connections that come and the conversations and just the moments of feeling like you belong here because nature belongs to all of us. So anyway, this was such a great conversation. Thank you all so much for listening. Are you wrapping us up?
Another round of applause, please. Woo! This was a great evening. Wasn't this a great evening? We learned stuff. And that is, I mean, I learn always from these conversations, but I will say that, it's really important when you talk about movement. And I am not a runner, obviously, but I remember during the pandemic, and we did a virtual 5K. And Megan was like, at least you need to be part of the virtual 5K. So I did the virtual 5K and we went to what was Civic Field before they just dug it up. And I did. I went to Brooks and got my shoes because she told me where to go get shoes. And I went and I did that for like 3 days and just did it. And I was like, thank you, even in the pandemic time, to start moving. So thank you for reminding me to do that. So again, thank you so much for being here. Couple of things I want to talk about. One is, if you enjoyed this, please come back. We're going to do it again next month. Actually, on May the 3rd, we're going to have a conversation with Mayor Harrell. So you will definitely want to get registered for that. That'll be going up rather shortly. Also, if you've enjoyed this, please feel free to donate to us as well, seattlecityclub.org. It's your donations that help us to be able to put on events like this in a place like this. And I want to give a special round of applause to my staff and the AV team, Bermuda's Media, volunteers, and also Comcast is our title sponsor. So again, May 3rd, right here, we're going to be with the mayor, maybe some other surprises too, but I hope to see you around. So please be safe getting home tonight, and we'll see you next month. Oh, wait, there's more. Jeff's reminded me of it. So other than Civic Cocktail, which we love to do, we also have another program called Civic Boot Camp. And so we've actually done it in 3 parts. We just did our virtual one last week, and it's all centered around transportation, but specifically transportation accessibility. So those sidewalks come into play, all those other things. So we're doing 2 in-person kind of field trippy ones. One is going to be on April the 14th, kind of focused on the North End. And the one on the 21st will be featuring kind of the South End, like Columbia City. Rainier Beach. So please go to our website, find our Eventbrite. We're going to be sharing that out, but please participate and share that out, because I think it's really, really important that we get to understand how transportation works in this region and how it affects all of us. So again, thank you. Have a good evening.